Hello, I'm Brenda Murray, and this is Studio 56. And today I'm going to be chatting with the amazing British artist Neil Whitehead about his new book that just came out, Line and Wash in the Urban Landscape. And he's going to be showing lots of examples of his work, and you're going to be so blown away by the gorgeous, loose, splashy watercolor sketches that he does. So let's get started. If you're new to Studio 56, you should know that in addition to hosting free interviews and demos with artists, we also produce online workshops for artists and we organize vacation workshops for artists, painting holidays, artist retreats. We still have tickets available to some of our gorgeous vacation workshops coming up in 2025. We'll be hosting a pastel workshop in Costa Brava, Spain, in April with Brian Jernigan. We're hosting a watercolor workshop in the hilltop villages of Provence with Sebastian Toman in April. And we will be in Milan and Lake Como for a watercolor workshop in May with Hazel Sohn. We're hosting a gouache workshop in the hilltop villages of Umbria, Italy in June with Gary Goretz. And this week, we'll be launching a new workshop in Quebec City in August with Stephanie Bauer. And we'll also be in Bruges and Ghent in September with Hazel Sohn. So you can find out more about our vacation workshops and artist retreats and our online workshops at www.studio56boutique.com. So today I'm going to be chatting with the wonderful Neil Whitehead about his new book, Line and Wash in the Urban Landscape. Let me tell you a little bit about Neil. Neil studied illustration at the University of Portsmouth. He's an award-winning urban landscape artist from Taunton, Somerset, UK. He's known for his highly recognizable style that combines rich, expressive lines and fluid colors in watercolor and in ink. His artworks, inspired by urban architecture and the vibrant towns and cities we inhabit, offers a fresh and dynamic interpretation of urban environments. And he's also a Derwent brand ambassador. So let's bring Neil into the call. There he is. Hi, Neil. Welcome.
Hi, Brenda. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very good.
Good,
So,
good.
everyone, you should know that we are going to be doing a draw for a free copy of Neil's book. Show us the book, Neil.
Ta-da. There we go.
Ta-da! Yes, this beautiful book. We're going to be doing a draw. I was trying to get Neil to do the draw, but that somehow it just wasn't possible. So I'm going to be doing it, and you can see that all the numbers are here in this glass jar. Not for one copy, not for two copies, but for three copies. So we're going to be doing three draws today because his publisher, which is Search Press.
Search Press, yeah.
Yeah, Search Press publisher was very, very generous. So that's really nice that they would do that. So we're going to do the draw at the end of our call. Now, the way that we're doing the draw is by the number of your order. So all of you came and you signed up for a free ticket to this interview, and that ticket has an order number on it. And it'll be starting off with 17 something something something. So that is how we're going to do the draw, by that order number. So if you, during this interview, you might want to just take a moment to look and find out what that order number is. If you can't find the order number, we will match you up. We'll match the name with the order number. So we'll get to that in a bit. So Neil, tell us about your experience as an artist, as an urban sketcher. For how long have you been doing urban sketching?
Good question, really. I kind of a long time, really. It's become super popular over the last decade with Gabriel Campanario setting up urban sketches and bringing it into the mainstream. If I go back into the old days when I was a student, yeah, most of my sketchbooks then were sat on the steps in the city centre, sketching and drawing people. So I kind of, yeah, I've always kind of done it, obviously, and people before me as well. So, but now it's much more recognised as a as a way of keeping a reportage of life and a diary of people, and it's something so much more expressive than photography. Although I still do love my photography, it's that a different kind of look and feel, and you get that a much more personal take on a scene, whereas everyone taking a picture of the same scene will normally have the same shot most of the time. So I think that's where the value is. And I think the biggest thing for me for urban sketching now is more the community.
Yes.
Whereas I started out, it was pretty lonely, and you sat on the steps and closed your sketchbook and went home. So now
Yeah.
you get obviously tours around the world. I was fortunate to go off to Switzerland last year to do this, and I've worked with the Urban Sketchers team over in Latvia and in London. And yes, that sense of community is great, and then you have the kind of the throw down of sketchbooks at the end. That's always good, and then you pack up and go and have a nice meal and a beer. So it's all part of the experience.
It's fantastic. I know. I love urban sketching, and I was on the board of Urban Sketchers for 4 years, long time.
Yeah. Oh wow.
It's a great organization. It's wonderful. Really believe in it. Did your style is really like a lot of, you start off with a contour line and then you're adding the watercolor or ink afterwards. Did that develop like since your university days? Did you always start off that way?
Yeah, I guess like most, I started off with a pencil, my trusty 2B pencil, but I was always the victim of overworking my work, my art. So shading and blending, and it used to get so muddy, and then the sketchbook blurs and smudges. So I look for something as an alternative to stop me overworking and getting too tight on the detail.
Yeah.
And I was always envious of really nice loose artworks that had a bit more expression rather than trying to be super realistic.
Yeah.
So I guess it just, like everyone, your style evolves really. You try new materials. And I started off just working with a biro. So it meant you haven't got to take a pencil sharpener with you.
Wait, sorry, working with a what?
Like a biro pen. So
I don't know this. Is that a brand?
no, it's like just a standard ink pen. It's like a plastic
Okay.
ink pen, like yeah.
Like a ballpoint.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah. So
Okay.
it's
Mm-hmm.
known as a biro, certainly in the UK it is. And then I kind of looked at ink pens, like dipping pens, cartridge pens, something that gave me a little bit more nice and portable. And then I kind of like moved into much more kind of scratchier, quicker work using fine liners. Again, it dried straight away, which was a benefit over the kind of more traditional cartridge pens and dipping pens.
Yeah.
And then obviously then you can vary the size quite nicely. So I've got drawerfuls of pens now, and varying size. Yeah, as is probably everyone on this call. And something I touch on in my book is materials.
Yeah.
Because my gosh, it's a minefield, and I've worked with people that sat on a workshop who've got far more kit than I could possibly carry around with me.
Yeah. And they bring it with them everywhere.
I think it's quite a humbling moment when, I mean, this afternoon I did a sketch and I didn't take the water with me. So I just dragged my tub through the puddle. So it was a little bit muddy, but it was of the day. So it's been a bit of a miserable day here in the southwest of England. But yeah, I think you can be transfixed by all the kit out there.
Yeah.
And I enjoy it too. It's good to try new stuff, but don't get too transfixed on what pen, what bit of paper. But
I mean, most people probably on this call have a whole cupboard like me, full of different papers and pens and pastels and paints and inks and all kinds of things. Yeah, but generally, I mean, I think it's good if you can kind of whittle that down to something that's reasonable to carry around with you.
Yeah, I think that's the natural process. You kind of cast a wide net, and then you find, okay, I don't like using that, I don't like that, and then you end up. I've got one paintbrush I tend to use for 90% of my sketches and out and about pieces, and then the other 200 are sat in the cupboard.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So your book is
Yeah,
published by Search Press. Is it available to order now?
it's on pre-order now, so it will be available 13th of December. So yeah, get your orders in for Christmas. That's my good advice. Available through amazon.com.co.uk. You can buy direct via the publishers at Search Press, or it's available on Penguin Random House, and yeah, a host of stores physically, certainly in the UK and possibly across Europe and the US.
Cool. Okay, cool. So we're going to turn off our cameras and have a little closer look at some of the images that are in the book.
Okay.
And so let's do that now. All right, so let's start off with the cover. This is the cover of your book.
Yeah.
There we
Okay.
go. With a typical example of the kind of work that you do.
So we started the book about 2 years ago. So I went through a few months of disbelief, thinking this must be someone trying it on, but actually no, it was all real, and they obviously wanted to profile me in a book. It included 2 photo shoots over the last couple of years, and the first photo shoot was in London. So for me, that's kind of a spiritual home. I grew up in southwest London, kind of transfixed by the architecture, and I used to work on Fleet Street, so famous for many for the old newspapers of London and England. But opposite to where I used to work was St Paul's Cathedral, which obviously is a colossal building, and yeah, if you've not been walked around it, you'll be transfixed by its beauty. Anyway, so I said, look, I want to go to St Paul's. I think that's a great start. I had a camera crew walking around with me, and a photo editor and a director. So we weren't the most conspicuous walking down the street, and there was me carrying a tripod and a paint set. But we sat in front of St Paul's Cathedral, and it just didn't feel right. It felt a little bit too empowering. There was too much going on, and it was it was the sketch that everyone was doing. There was 2 or 3 artists naturally around me just sketching away. So we just moved down the street actually, and what you can see towards the just off centre to the left is one of the parts of St Paul's Cathedral, just to the side of the main dome. And actually, that was the angle I wanted to take. I think a lot of the time, if I'm out with an urban sketching group, I'm the one that's kind of trying to climb on the roof to get a different angle, just so I've got maybe a different take on a scene that's been drawn maybe 500,000 times before. So what
I
you can
get
see
that.
there,
That makes sense to me.
yeah,
Yeah, something
just
different.
yeah, absolutely, because we didn't want the book to be all London centric, and that's why there's shots from other places. But even then, it's not the front cover isn't Big Ben or the Hounds of the Parliament, which is very much a London landmark. It's a slight shift away, and that fits into, again, my kind of style and what I look for in a good scene.
Cool. And so you're starting off with the line first, obviously.
Always line first, yeah. One of the most common questions I get through any social media is, do you go line or paint first? For me, it's all about drawing. I love drawing. That's what I grew up drawing. My mum and dad and my dog and my sister, drove them crazy. Sat watching TV. It was just a quick line here or there, quick portrait. Inevitably, they'd move and they'd be gone. So for me, drawing buildings is great because they don't move, which is one big problem solved. And working with the pen first, I can't express how much I enjoy the mark making. It's really therapeutic, and I think a lot of people can relate to that. What I love doing, also, as I touched on before, is trying to keep something simple and not overworked. Whereas I used to go with pencils and shading, trying to get every detail.
Yeah.
With a sketch like this is typical of my kind of continuous line drawing. So I might set myself a time limit. It might be 30 seconds, it might be 3 minutes. And then you take a complex scene and say, right, what are you going to pick out in that 2 or 3 minute session? And it's interesting doing workshops how people's sketches completely alter. because their brain is just focused on one detail, not the other, even from the same location. And for me, that's the process I love, because you can just start dragging the pen round, and it has a kind of a rhythm of its own. And there's imperfections. There's not much right with that drawing if you're looking at it from an architectural perspective. Obviously, there's some fundamentals there, but it's all about capturing the scale, and finding the negative space. So the space in between the kind of the statue on the left and the two turrets in the background, that's where my head's at, rather than drawing the detail on those items. It's the gaps in between.
So how long would it take you to do this sketch here, for example?
This, yeah, I can tell you. So that was the original, was around an A5, so quite a small sketchbook, and I would spend probably 2 minutes doing that.
And for our North American viewers, an A5 is about how many inches?
It's probably about 6 inches by about 5 inches.
Okay. And so what kind of pen did you use for this sketch? Because it makes a big difference, the kind of pen that you use. And
Yep.
so to accomplish this, what kind of pen did you use?
So I use a fine liner pen. Obviously, working with Derwent, they send me some pens to try it all the time, and I've gone through various brands. The line maker brand or range from Derwent just fits the bill for me, because it's got, and this is quite particular to me, the kind of the nib, the extension of the fine liner piece right at the end is quite long. So if you angle the pen, you don't scratch the page with a kind of metal casing, although that's pretty specific to me. But it's good
No,
pen.
that's common. I would love
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
I hate that when it seems to wear down so quickly, these
Yeah. Yeah.
nibs.
Because I like to vary the line weight, and sometimes you can get a lighter line by just angling the pen and just pressing that little bit gentler on the page, and you want the pen to still flow even though there's minimal pressure.
And so that's called a Derwent line maker.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Good to know. All right, cool. And I'll just zoom this in. So when you say continuous line, to you, does that mean you never take your pen off the paper? Or does it mean you take it off occasionally? Or do you sort of make a little rule for yourself about that?
Yeah, I'd say probably 95% of the time the pen is on the paper, and there might be a moment when I just stop back, look at the scene, but then I'll just reconnect back on the same line. So there's no real obvious breaks there. Yeah, you could probably trace the line all the way around that, and it would come out the other side of the page.
So when you're doing that,
Mhm.
you're what is it, where are you starting? Are you starting with your main focal point, or do you care about fitting everything into the space of your page, or is it more about just getting the main thing in right in the middle? Are you starting there, or how are you thinking about the composition?
Good question. I think sometimes sometimes I don't even think about it, but a lot of the time, rather than thinking about where do I start, it's composing the scene. So you'll see on that shot there that the kind of the tram lines that you see at the front that are kind of curling towards the distance, they occupy the kind of left hand third of that page. So if you were to split that page into 3 columns, you've got those tram lines feeding away onto a horizon line. And yeah,
Right?
I don't want to be too technical here, but that horizon line there is also occupying the bottom third of that page. So it's kind of classic photography. So I'm
Yeah.
splitting my view into a grid. So
Right.
you've got the vanishing point is more often than not is occupying that kind of that action space where an intersection of our grid goes. And yeah, there's a big section in the book about that.
Yeah.
But generally, as a rule of thumb, I'll start from the left hand side, just because you don't want to smudge the page, and that's kind of where I sit. Again, if you're left-handed, then and obviously the opposite way. But yeah, as a rule of thumb, I will generally start and I'll try and start the sketch so I know that I've got enough space for the sky. So on that one, if I would, probably I started on the left-hand side. I got that small structure on the left sorted, and then I know the scale I've got left for the big building.
Okay. So generally speaking, as a rule of thumb, you're disciplining yourself and telling yourself that you really need to keep the pen in contact with the paper 95% of the time.
Yeah, and don't be worried about taking it off to join things. So you'll see some of the windows on these sketches, they're linked together with a line. Mm-hmm. I think the other thing to note, what brings these to life sometimes is the line weight. That's really critical. So you'll see some of the line weight is a bit darker. So I either pressed harder, or other lines I just pressed lighter. And those kind of structures that are nearer to you naturally are a little bit more visible, a bit more dominant. So you'll see there's quite a dominant line on that structure on the left-hand side as it cuts down again that left-hand third of the page. And then there was I think there's some electrical wires, things in the sky. So I gave the impression, but it helps connect the sketch. So all these elements kind of come together rather than sitting in isolation.
Oh, so cool. And are you the kind of person who uses the same pen, actual physical pen, throughout the whole sketch, or do you switch up in terms of nib sizes and so on within one sketch?
It depends on scale, really. So if I'm working larger, so I've done pieces that are A1, so that's 30, 40 inches wide. Then that's when I'll start using a range of pens, because there's a limit to how hard you can press. So I'll go from a baseline sketch using maybe a 0.5, and then I'll work up some of the more dominant lines in a 0.8. And that's when I start to overlay continuous line sketching.
Sorry, not 0.8 is 0.8. It's just 0.8. Yeah, okay. Yeah. And when you say 40 inches, you mean 40 centimeters?
No, so probably, yes, you're probably right. Yeah, 40 inches is
okay. All right. I was just thinking, wow, that's more than 3 feet across.
Okay. So the UK equivalent is like A2 to A1.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's hard. We're all talking about the same thing, but in different languages. All right. So you start off, you've got your line drawing on there, and then you're thinking either paint or ink. So I read that you use both you either use watercolor or you use ink. What informs that decision?
Sorry, in terms of the colored ink you're talking about, or the dark line ink?
So what I read is that you sometimes use colored ink to paint your sketch with, and other times watercolor. Is that right?
Sometimes, predominantly watercolor. I'd say,
okay.
Predominantly watercolor. This one was a watercolor piece. Again, it's St Paul's Cathedral, so there's a theme there throughout my work. This was a piece I did in collaboration with Derwent some time ago, and it was to working on one of their new sets. And again, it was trying to get a different angle on the scene, and I was just trying to get a bit more expressive in the color use here. So again, not coloring everywhere, leaving quite a lot of white space, and adding a bit of drama in the sky. And like a lot of my work, when you put the color in, I'm letting it bleed over the lines, so it has that kind of that intrigue. There's things going on. It's not, I was never that great at coloring to the line in my coloring books as a boy. So maybe it stems from that. But I love that kind of that mixture, and then it always battles with depth. So you've got the sky merging with the roof, and what does that mean? It provokes a bit of interest rather than it being perfect.
Right. Okay. So, first of all, when you add the watercolor, do you have your paper on a flat surface or is it tilted?
I would generally tilt it a little bit, yeah. So as you can see there, that's slightly tilted, that piece, and I've got a bit of kitchen roll to catch the drips. But I love to work portrait most of the time, and naturally you want, like, your brush strokes. If you're doing working in acrylics, you want them to follow the kind of grain of the picture. With same with watercolor for me, if it's structures that are tall, I want to see the watercolor coming down in the same way. If I've got watercolor going sideways, it's going to start offering a bit of a conflict. So a lot of the time I'll tilt it, and I'll encourage it. Sometimes I'll pick up the pad and I'll bang it on the table vertically, and then the whole scene drops, and you get that color merge, and you see a lot of the drips sometimes just come off the bottom of the page. So yeah, there's me preparing for any drips that are going to pour off the edge.
Okay. And are you an easel person?
Um, yes and no. If I'm working on bigger stuff, I've got an easel. If I'm out and about, I have got a makeshift easel. I've got an old tripod of mine, and then I bought some birch plywood, and you can buy a little fitting. I bought one on eBay, and you can clip that to the tripod, and then that is my kind of field tripod. And I stand up. I'm not that comfortable sitting down sketching with a sketchbook on the knee. I find that too unstable. So I've got to have a nice big solid wall to work from, or I'll use my field tripod.
So you're standing in front of a tripod.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. All right. I'm going to just check now and see if we have some questions here, which I meant to open up the Q&A and I didn't do that. There we go. Okay, we have some questions. Let me see if I can. Sorry, just give me a moment. Okay. So let's see. Care is asking, what's your favorite ink pen and what's your favorite sketchbook size, format, paper brand?
Yeah. Okay. So pen. So I like the Derwent line makers. That's my kind of go-to pen now. I tried quite a range, as I mentioned before. I like the way that the nib protrudes enough. It works well on a wet sketchbook, and when you flood the page, it doesn't run like some fine liners. They'll just kind of merge with the paint. Generally, I'll put the lines down first, let them dry 90%, and then sometimes I quite encourage a little bit of interaction with watercolor on the ink, just to see if it bleeds slightly. And what I'll do additionally with that pen, once the whole piece is, say, 95% dry, I'll go back over some areas, and because the paper is slightly damp, you get a much darker dark from that fine liner.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, yeah.
In terms of sketchbooks, my go-to out and about is the Moleskine range of watercolor books. They're really sturdy, thick pages, nice and portable. Yeah, I've got one handy, but it's probably half the size of my book at the moment.
Okay. And do you use hot or cold press paper?
I go cold press most of the time because
Oh.
I kind of like the rougher texture.
Yep. And Gina's asking, do you use Inktense paint by Derwent?
I do, yeah. So that one in the scene there is an Inktense one. That's their larger set. Yeah, they're nice and vibrant, and you can layer them without it diluting the layer below, which is great. It's nothing worse than watercolor on top and it starts conflicting with below. And what you can do with the Inktense is really use minimal water, and you get that really strong pigment. It's always dissatisfying when you come out to watercolor and it's all faded and dropped 40%.
Yeah.
It's that's
yeah.
sometimes
And do
demoralizing.
you sometimes use the Inktense pencils?
I haven't used the pencils yet. No, I keep meaning to try them. But yeah, again, I'm scared of getting into the trap of being too detailed.
Yeah. And a couple of people are asking about the colors that you use. So Mary says, can you tell us what color you're using? And Care is asking, how do you choose the colors? Are the colors what you see in the scene, or are they from your imagination?
Yeah, again, it's a very common question. They're normally a product of what I've seen on the scene or on how I'm feeling. So it's a mixture of the two. Certainly on the front cover of the book, and some other sketches, there's some areas of red, and the traditional London red bus was constantly driving past me. So all I could think about was red. If it's a hot day, I'll be influenced by that. So might see some reds in some of my sketches. Certainly when I was in Switzerland when it was silly hot. So it's maybe the colours I see. There might be an umbrella in the scene that's vibrant. I think I want to. That's the colour of this scene. I think that's where I try and give some expression. I love sketching out when it's nice and hot and sunny. So there's a lot of vibrant blues in my work. And often I'll use the Inktense paints, but I'll also use some tube paints with a pigment called phthalo blue. That's spelled PTHALO. That's a really powerful, vibrant blue.
Yeah.
If you pop down some Inktense paper, it just really pops.
Yeah. So it sounds like your answer is a mix of the two. You're letting some
Yeah.
colors from your environment inspire you, but maybe also adding some from your imagination.
Yeah.
Okay. And Laurel's asking, what size brush are you using? You said you had a favorite brush.
Yeah, again, super common question. I have what is a filbert brush. So again, it's there's a shot in the book. I can't recall the size offhand. It's kind of like the it's about the size of my thumb, if that's a good guide in terms of the brush, the bristles. A filbert brush tends to hold a lot of water, and that's what I love. So I'll load that brush, and then as you add it to the paper, you don't quite know what's going to happen. That's the It helps break that comfort zone, because if you're going in with a brush that's really small, you just can't load that page, and you're going to see brush strokes here and there, and then that's not something that generally I want to look to. So I will push a filbert brush. I mean, there's lots of pieces of my YouTube video using that brush. So if you get a chance to jump onto YouTube, have a look at those there, and they show me building the sky up. And it's literally, I almost push the brush into the paper. So yeah, it's not delicate.
Yeah, I've seen you do that. It was a very loaded brush, and you really pushed it and spread out the bristles quite a bit.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then I think it was tilted as well. So then everything started running, and it's like, wow, this is so brave. Because you at that point you said, I'm going to not try to control the situation. I'm going to just let it happen.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. It splits opinion, that technique. Sometimes people think, "Wow, what are you doing? That's crazy. How do you control it?" And I said, "Well, I don't really want all the control. That's
Yeah,
water's color's got a mind of its own. So let it sing."
yeah. And so in this example that we're looking at, I'm seeing a lot of splashing as well. I'm wondering if you could talk about splashing.
Yeah, the speckles, they're prevalent in all my work. And I think for me, that's trying to get across an area of movement, because naturally there's birds, there's people, there's commotion. I think it came about from probably dropping my paintbrush on my sketchbook once, and there was this kind of splodge, and you think, "Oh, I've ruined it." And I thought, "Oh, actually, no, that kind of adds to it." So I'll using the same brush, I will I'll naturally take a point where I've got some good color values in. I've left a chunk of negative space, which I like doing. Again, not to everyone's cup of tea, but for me, it helps bring in a bit of character. And then I'll just, with a flick of my index finger on the bristles, something just happens, is spontaneous, with little control, and it just gives that impression of a bit of movement, a bit of rhythm in the scene.
Cool, very cool. And so we'll just ask a couple of other questions here. Oops. Oh, just Sorry, just a moment. Come back to that. And so Mary is asking, do you mix your own greens?
Yeah, generally because I've normally start with the sky. So there's normally a blue tone through the sky, and then I'll bring in a green or yellow ochre, and then you get that kind of that green pop. I find some of the greens, the standard greens you get in certainly watercolor pans, can just be a bit stark or a bit too harsh. So I quite like that. Just pop in that yellow and let it run in the blue, and you start to get a slightly different green to the standard set.
Cool. So, Neil, looking at your paintings, when I look at a bunch in a row, I'm asking myself, because I have a mind that wants to organize everything.
Mm-hmm.
I'm asking myself, what is going into your decision-making process when you're deciding where to put the paint? So is it,
Yeah.
and how much of the paper should remain white? So can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's I, I don't really I don't start the piece with that in mind, but there's normally quite a dominant structure in the scene, and obviously the one on the screen there, you've got this dominant structure right in the center. So I made sure that it wasn't overly painted, and the sky is quite, yeah, obviously quite a dark blue going on this. And I remember that day it was sunny, then it was raining. It was four seasons in one day. So the sketch started with these dark skies, and then I drew the sky down to give the impression of the shadows on that building, which kind of curves away to the left, and then and the very front left, where I've left that white section, was actually the side of a huge cathedral when I was over in the southwest of England. Immense detail. I couldn't even, my head would explode trying to get every bit of detail. So I thought, I'm just going to make it all negative space. And I admire a lot of the artists that do that, certainly through Instagram and Facebook, that I see. They'll black out or blank out a whole section, and just by the outline of that shape, you know what that building is, or it could be the silhouette of a person. Mm-hmm. So for me, yeah, it's just, I guess if I analyze it, which I haven't done, probably 50% of my sketches are just left white. Okay. It's about that contrast for me. And again, I touched on the book, as you'll see in that sketch there, and this one as well. I'll line out where the main sky intersects down through two structures. So there's almost like a V shape in a lot of my work. And then it's a bit like coloring in. So some of the shapes I'll deliberately just paint within the lines to my best extent, and then some I'll leave white. Again, it's all about high contrast. So it's not so much leaving it all white, but it's what's right up against that white. How does that make that stand out?
Mm-hmm. And so the last one that we looked at, and then this one as well. Mm-hmm. I can see that you've used your paint for a very dramatic sky, which is completely logical. It makes sense to me. But then, you've just picked out pieces from mm-hmm. the buildings to put paint on down in the buildings.
Yeah. Sorry, Brenda.
I was just going to say, but what I'm thinking is that the blues in your skies in these last two wasn't necessarily supposed to be the sky.
No, I think, well, they were both hot days. So I was influenced certainly by the natural blue of the sky. But what you'll see in both of them, there's quite a lot of red. So when I first did this sketch, my wife said to me, "Oh goodness, did you cut yourself?" Because she thought it was like the blood over my sketchbook. Because no, it was just really hot. And in both scenes, there was these buses kept driving past me. So a lot of time, if it was a tourist bus, it would block my view because I'm stood there getting a bit annoyed. So in the end, I didn't want to draw a bus. Drawing cars doesn't excite me. So I just splattered it with red because that was all I could see that day. So you see the kind of the patches of red are the impression, almost like when you see like a photography, that kind of long shot, and the lights are passing down the street like the street lights,
Yeah.
and the elements of heat go through that orange and the red. Yeah, it's very evocative of how I was feeling that day. And just see, I can remember standing there with 99% of my sketches. I can remember, oh yeah, it was hot that day, or it was cold, or I didn't want to be there that day. So it
Oh
does
yeah.
leave an imprint.
Yeah, it does. You definitely remember. And the red, if you took if you took a video of where you were, what your scene was, and
Mm.
with all these red buses going by, there would have been red in that video.
Yeah,
So yeah,
absolutely.
it
Yeah.
makes sense to me.
Again, so this was London sketch. So famous Oxford Street, one of the side roads again. Which was much larger. This was around say 30 centimeters tall, so a bit bigger than my normal sketchbook. And I was just transfixed by the doorway on the left. It was just beautiful, and I loved the composition. So what you'll see again from the vertical on the left, and the buildings on the right, the sky almost takes like a V shape.
Yeah.
So you've got that, it's dramatic, and then the vanishing point again is sat on that left hand third of this page. The horizon line is on the bottom third. Yeah, sorry for being too technical, but yeah, there is a little formula that I like to work to, and that's when you get that action and your eye kind of ends up going down the road.
Yeah.
Yes, that's, I guess, partly from my graphic design training, trying to train the eye, how you're gonna read the advert, that kind of stuff. But it also works well in photography, and I just made sure that I really emphasized the shadow in that doorway on the left, and just gave a quick splash on the steps at the front there, so it just kind of leads the viewer. And then the buildings in the background, oh my gosh, I mean, there is a chapter on windows in my book. I mean, love them or hate them, the windows are everywhere. So yeah, I probably hate them more than love them, so I'm not going to draw every window. It's just the impression of window, but windows are critical to scale. So I've done workshops before when people start doing these buildings, and then they'll draw every bit of the window pane and a window that they can't see. So all of a sudden you've got this mismatch. You've got this beautifully detailed window that is right in the background. So that means the ones in your foreground have got to be even better, because
Yeah.
you've thrown the scale out. So for me, it's about making sure that the window detail in the background is faint, is a lighter mark, smaller in scale, and again, yeah, typified there. So it's just using those windows to give scale, and they're great at just identifying the course of that vanishing point. So you'll see them trailing away, and they're your guides. That they're there as a help. But yeah, I don't go into much detail. It's a quick squiggle.
I think people enjoy the detail. You're not being too technical for the viewers, I don't think,
Yeah,
because they're into it. They want to
yeah,
know,
yeah.
how is this, what's your thinking? And so I
But
think,
yeah, so a lot of people ask me about perspective. How did you learn perspective? And I think it comes from holding up a ruler and just putting it on all the windows, and then you think, oh, okay, that angle's that way, that angle's the other way. Because if you can become so blind perspective if you look at it and you draw it in a sketchbook, and actually it's all going in a completely different direction. So you still, I still do today. I still have a cardboard mount which I cut out, and I just hold it up into my scene. I think, right, that's what I'm going to draw. I'm not going to get distracted by everything around me, because that's when urban sketching becomes just overwhelming sketching.
yeah,
Frame the scene. So right, that's where I'm working out. That 30 meters. Yeah, that's my scene, and then you've got your kind of fenced view.
right, right. Okay. Diana's asking, does your book contain exercises to follow along?
It does, yeah, yeah. It's got a few exercises. So talk about the continuous line drawing, contour drawing. Again, something that I used to do at art college. When you don't even look at the page, you just draw what you can see. That's a proper comfort zone rattler. Yeah, there's exercises for looking at windows, using the wash as well. So it's made up of kind of exercises towards the end of each chapter.
Okay, cool. And I have a question about your colors. So when you are choosing your colors, I know that we already talked about maybe
Mm-hmm.
pulling out something from a local color that's in the scene, and then maybe something from your imagination or whatever. Are you thinking at all about, because you're not using a lot of colors, so
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you're thinking at all about like a color theme for your sketch. You're thinking like maybe, okay, I'm starting off with this this yellow color, and I think it would
Yeah.
be complemented well by this certain blue hue or something like
Yeah.
that, or not at all.
Yeah, I think there's an element of that. I mean, some of the work that maybe is not my most favorite work has a huge range of colors, and actually, I think I prefer some of my pieces that are a little refined in the color palette range. Particularly that one, yes, that's a favorite of mine. It's actually on my wall behind me. But that one was a sunset kind of autumn, and you can that kind of that low light, and there was a bit of shadow cast on the building, and then just the little hint of color. And what you'll see in my work sometimes is just a splash of red or hints of yellow. I'm a big fan of just even little yellow fine liners. I've got a few of those, just dot and dab. I even borrowed my daughter's felt tip pens on a few location shoots, and pinks and yellows, and they just, yeah, along the lines of the kind of speckling, they just add a bit of movement and just lift some of the colors.
Super cool. Diana is asking, do you have any strategies to make sure what you want included in the sketch fits on the page?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, big. Yeah. I grew up when you start the sketch and think, oh, hang on a minute, I can't fit any sky in here. So that's why I love having a nice big expressive sky. And again, I touched on it earlier, but what I'll try and do is my horizon line is generally a third of the way up the page. So you've got then 2/3 for everything else. And if I make sure that the main structure, so the structure on this sketch on the screen on the right hand side is actually a war memorial, I drew that first, and then I was set because everything else is going to be smaller. I think the danger is if you start on the left hand side and make those buildings tall, then you've got to go bigger again. So I guess I
Yeah.
think we kind of touched on it earlier in terms of where do you start the sketch. A lot of the time, if you get the biggest structure down, then you know everything's going to fit.
Cool. Super cool. All right. Tell us about this sketch.
This is one of my earlier sketches actually. This is local to me, a little shopping centre. Bit of bunting going across there during a summer festival. So yeah, this hangs on my wall above my TV at home actually. So it's one of my favourite sketches. It's just got a bit of character. Again, not much detail. You can tell it's quite an early one because the windows on the left hand side, I've started to do the window panes, and I don't really do that anymore because
You don't do it at all, even if it's close up.
no, and you'll see the window on the left at the very top actually is
Yeah.
always all wrong perspective. That middle part of the window frame completely
Yeah.
throws it out, but it survives because I haven't done any more working on it. If I was then trying to correct it, then I'd be like throwing in too many lines. Then that would be all you could see because what's that person done to that window? But it's when I started to really use skies and bring the paint through the kind of foreground.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and
I have a question about the coloring again, going back to
yeah.
the coloring. Do you ever do wet on wet? Like, do you ever wet the paper first and then let the ink or the paint flow in the wet area, or you always go straight in with your color?
Okay, yeah, obviously I've tried it plenty of times. Okay, yeah, it's not my go-to. Because I love to draw. That's so I will draw first. I think wet on wet is probably that might complicate that slightly if I'm going to draw and then wet the page. Again, something to try, but it's not something I've done a great deal.
Yeah.
That scene is the same scene as the other one previously. That's just a slightly different take. And I think what that really shows is using people for scale. So all of a sudden you kind of get an idea of the structure, height because of the outline of the people. And I'm just keeping it simple. So we're not drawing hands and feet because most of the time we'll be trying to make them up. Actually, when you take a quick snapshot of someone, it's all about the shoulders and the outline of the head. And again, the further in the distance they are, the less detail you have.
Right. Right. Wonderful. Beautiful. I knew that people, I think this must be our last one, Neil. I think I just thought that people would really enjoy seeing your sketches because you are incredibly loose and splashy
Mm,
and eye-catching at the same time. And so I just really love your work, and I've been following you for a while. And
thank you.
yeah, and I just think that if people aren't familiar with your work, that they would go, "Whoa, how is
Mm,
he doing this?" And it's also interesting to think how far you can go with that really loose, expressive style and really splashy paint, and yet still capture a scene. Like, still capture a recognizable scene where somebody might go, "Oh, that's River Street or whatever."
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
It's
guess
interesting how far you can push it.
yeah. It's always. I think most of the people I've taught in workshops, that's the number one. How do I loosen up my sketches? And again, it's by going through, working fast, almost abstracting your scene. So I'm simplifying all the time. It's all about simplifying. And if there's things that you don't want to draw, just leave them out. That it's not. I say in my book, we're not trying to be architects, although I've got
Right.
great admiration for architects. This is about creating your own bit of artwork inspired by where you live and the structures around you and that urban space. So, if on that sketch there in far in the distance, absolutely there's other buildings there, but I've just let the sky tumble down. Um, and I thought, yeah, I'm happy with that. So I stopped there.
Cool. So, a question from Michael. He's saying, Neil, you mentioned adhering to some basic principles of perspective. However, even though your sketches are loose and playful, they seem to be held together well because of perspective principles, such as diminishing scale, size, texture of the elements as they recede to a vanishing point. And you also mentioned horizon line. Would you recommend having a good understanding of perspective in order to help frame your work?
Yeah, I would do in a quick answer. Yeah, certainly. So again, I think this can be overworked. So a lot of the books I've read before, I mean, it's like you need to have an exam at the end of it to understand perspective. And for me, they don't go on the lighter version. There's lots of perspective errors in this sketch, but it's about just giving enough hints to the viewer that the brain can connect it. So, like I said before, so the windows on the left-hand side here follow a vanishing point down to, again, the right-hand third of this sketch now. So that the action point is off to the right, the third way up. And all the windows lead that way. So my windows are my guides.
Yeah.
They're your absolute friends. That they will take that viewer to that center. And if it's not quite working, just draw a line there. Draw a loose line emanating from the vanishing point, and you give those visual clues. It's in my book. I talk about it. It's like a little spider web. Sometimes you just leave clues, and your brain will fit it together.
Yeah. Yeah, very cool, very cool. And I missed a question right at the beginning. Pat was asking about how much time it took you to complete that first St. Paul sketch. She says, I
Yeah.
love the color blocks in the piece. But so on average, are your sketches more or less, it takes you about the same amount of time, or you have some shorter ones, some longer ones?
They vary. I remember doing that one because that was pretty nerve-wracking. That was the first sketch I did when I had a camera crew around me and people moving the crowd on. So I think that took about an hour because I was it was nerve-wracking and I had my palette on the floor. But naturally, I would give myself half an hour, probably something like that. So I would working maybe 30 centimeters by 20 centimeters. Yeah,
Is
and
this the sketch? Is this the one?
yeah, I think that's one.
Okay. So you said half an hour for this one.
I think roughly between 20 to 30 minutes. I get the sketch down straight away with the paints, and once it's dried 95%, I then might go into some of the detail with a pen again, just so the black really pops. Um, and that's quite a good example, that one of not getting caught in the detail. So the kind of turret on the left hand side was super intricate, and I've just given the impression of it. So it's just a few squiggles and lines here. It's just like you might see in passing rather than all the intricate detail, because as soon as you put all the detail again right in the background, you've got to make the detail in the foreground even better because you get
Right.
this mismatch in scale.
Hmm. Okay. Very cool. And so you said you would go in again with pen after the ink dries?
Yeah, a lot of the time I will do, and I'll just trace over some of the lines before because the paper's that slightly bit damp, and it just it just lifts that black line. Of
Cool. Neil, can you turn your video back on?
course.
There we go. Well, that was very interesting, very exciting. I think people really enjoyed seeing your beautiful work. So thank you so much.
Okay.
Um, so your book, just to go back about your book, it's going to be available starting December 13th, you said?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And pretty much everywhere. If people want to go to Amazon, they would find it there, and
Yeah.
booksellers and
Absolutely.
so on. And Pat says, Neil, your work is so inspiring. Thank you for sharing your work. I knew people
Thank
would
you.
like love it. Yeah. And just so that people know, our wonderful friend Neil has agreed to do a free demo. I'm talking free demo
Yeah.
in January, and we don't have a date yet, but we will work that out. And so, if you're new to Studio 56, please subscribe to our newsletter. And we have a monthly newsletter coming out. I have one coming out in a couple of days, and we'll probably announce the date and a link for you to get a ticket to the free demo in that newsletter. We'll know by then what the date is, and so please subscribe. And just a couple other points. We're going to have our draw in a moment. I want people to know that we have other free interviews and demos coming up on December 6th. We will be interviewing Captain Tom Peidelhauser. He's Canadian, working out of California, and he's going to be showing lots of examples of his very gorgeous, expressive work. We're having a run on expressive artists. Do you know Tom, Neil?
I've heard the name. Yeah, certainly. I need to remind myself of his work.
Yeah, he's very good. And on December 8th, we'll be doing a draw for a free watercolor painting by the amazing Sebastian Toman of Ireland. And so you'll need to sign up for that so that you can get in the draw. And on January 7th, Gary Goretz is going to be doing a gouache demo. And so sometime after that, our friend Neil will be doing a watercolor demo, a sketching demo. So that's going to be exciting. So if you're not already a subscriber of our newsletter, please go to www.studio56boutique.com and hit subscribe. There should be a pop-up that comes up right away. So Neil, I think it's probably time.
Yeah, let's do the draw.
I think it's time. So here we have all of the order numbers for everyone who signed up to this. I'm going to keep it up so you can see there's nothing up my sleeve. To everyone who signed up for this interview, and you were assigned an order number when you signed up. And we're going to be pulling out 3 tabs. And so if you can find your order number, then you will know. And I was going to get Neil to read the number, but we figured out, I've got one here. We figured out that it's really hard to, oh, this is a blank. This was a blank. Okay, I don't know how that got in there. We'll do that again.
All the chances.
Yeah, I know. Really. And so, okay, we've got one. So I don't know if Neil, if you can see that number. Can you see the number?
It's a little fuzzy. It's a 1-7 to start with, but I wouldn't want to say.
All right, I'll tell you. 17696. Okay, so that's the winner of one of the books. And we'll pull out another. I was hoping Neil could read the numbers, but
Let's try again, shall we?
no, okay, sure. You can try.
Oh, that's a 17319, I think. I feel like I'm doing an eye
That's
test.
right, 17319. Okay, and the third book. Neil said, this is like an eye exam. All right, I've got one in my hand.
Oh, it's a bit blurry, that
Oh,
one.
that's upside down, first of all.
That'd be good. I think that could be 17397.
Yes, 17397. Okay, so I know that you probably don't have those numbers in front of you. So I have the numbers. So let's find out who the three winners are. We'll match them up to names. First number is 17696. And that winner is 17696 is, yep, 17696 is Nuno Santos Alexandre from Lisbon. Beautiful. Congratulations, Nuno. We'll be in touch to get your address and make sure that the book is sent off to you. So that's one. And the other person is 17319. And that would be Paula Webb. Paula Webb from Texas. Congratulations, Paula. And the third one is 17397. 17397. 17397 is M. McNutt. M. McNutt from Delaware. M. McNutt from Delaware. Congratulations. All right, exciting.
Well done.
So, well, I'll be in touch with those three people, and we'll see about getting the book mailed out to you. And thank you so much to Search Press for donating those books. That was very kind of them.
Fab. That's great. And enjoy the books.
Yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you so much, Neil, for your generous sharing of your work. And just a reminder, your book will be available everywhere starting December 13th. But people can pre-order now. They can
absolutely, yeah. No, get the order in and yeah, ready for Christmas.
Hopefully in time for Christmas. It sounds like a great Christmas gift. Thanks, everyone. I hope you'll come back to our free demos and interviews coming up in December and January with a bunch of wonderful artists, including our friend Neil in January. All right, take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye for now. Thank you, Neil.
Bye-bye.
Bye.